Hi and welcome to the Digital Digging YouTube channel. In this video we're taking a look at the Supermarine Attacker both in history and in the game of War Thunder. In common with most first generation jet aircraft, the Supermarine Attacker had a very brief time in service before being superseded by the next generation. And while its time in service was short and pretty uneventful, the development of the aircraft is certainly not without interest. Joe Smith's team was behind the design, and this team had an illustrious pedigree, having been responsible for the development of every version of Spitfire since R.J. Mitchell's death in 1937, and I can think of no other project that better illustrates the transition from prop fighters to jet fighters than the case of the Attacker. Such was the crossover period that the undercarriage and square-cut laminar flow wing of the Attacker were actually carried over from a prop design, that of the Supermarine Spiteful, an aircraft which was widely seen as the ultimate expression of the Spitfire design, although the naval version of this aircraft, the Sea Fang, had also been described as a Spitfire Too Far, a title which didn't so much reflect any shortcomings of the aircraft beyond the fact that the world of aviation was moving fast in another direction. The earliest name for the Attacker design was in fact the Jet Spiteful, which reinforces the transitional nature of air design during this period, as the RAF and Fleet Air Arm were rapidly reducing and in some cases altogether abandoning orders for the new Supermarine prop aircraft. Another transitional aspect of this project was that the Attacker was intended as an interim design while the wrinkles were still being ironed out of the Gloucester Meteor, an aircraft which also used the Rolls-Royce Nene jet engine. So from the very start, unless the Attacker could prove itself to be a very remarkable aircraft indeed, it was always going to be passed over as soon as the better option was prepared. 3 prototypes of the Attacker were ordered on August the 30th, 1944, the second and third of which were developed for the Fleet Air Arm. The development was protracted to say the least, with the first Attackers being delivered in August 1951. There were still some difficulties with the landing gear which were never overcome. One of the problems of using the traditional layout of a prop aircraft was that instead of a nose wheel, which made landing on carriers an easier job to calculate, the Attacker had a tail wheel which made things altogether harder. Aside from its shortcomings as a naval aircraft, it had the distinction of being the Fleet Air Arm's first jet fighter, and in the words of one aviation writer, it at least allowed them to look and sound more like a modern force. It was never used in anger by the FAA and was dropped from service by 1954, with the Royal Navy Volunteer Service continuing use until 1957. The only other force to use the Attacker was the Royal Pakistan Air Force. They were keen to acquire jet aircraft but didn't have a great quantity of funds at their disposal, and the British spotted an opportunity to offload 36 aircraft they no longer needed or indeed wanted. We can assume that the Royal Pakistan Air Force felt much the same after taking delivery, as within 3 years the only squadron to fly the Attacker converted to the F-8F Sabre. In the game, the Supermarine Attacker is a Tier 4 aircraft with a battle rating of 7.3. It has a maximum speed of 582 miles per hour or 922 kilometers per hour and a turn time of 23.7 seconds. It's armed with 4 20mm Mark V Hispano cannon with 624 rounds of ammunition and a reload time of 40 seconds. It can also carry up to 2,000 pounds or 907 kilograms of bombs or 12 76mm RP3 rockets. It's not entirely clear how the Attacker would have performed in combat, however in the game of War Thunder I'm happy to report that it makes a very welcome addition to the British jet lineup. Granted, we already have a splendid array of meteors, but it's nice to have something different to look at, and although the spiteful wings sticking straight out of the rather chubby body looks a trifle odd, some might argue that this doesn't look quite as odd as the Hispano cannons sticking out of them. You'd be wise not to underestimate this aircraft, however, as in the right hands this is a splendid little flyer, and as usual the Hispanos are capable of dishing out punishment to the unwary, and indeed the wary, to great effect. A word of warning though, you might want to get some practice in with the gun convergence before you get too brave. Right, that's it for another video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did then you remembered to give it a like. I know I often forget, and am equally often glad of a reminder. You may feel different, however, who knows, I mean, you might not need reminding at all, in which case, well done. That's a fine memory you have there. Mine's not so great, so I do need reminding, as may some of you. Have you done it yet? Are you going to do it? Well, if you did, then thank you very much indeed. I'm currently aiming a beam of goodwill in your direction, which I trust will be of commensurate value. Okay, cheerio chaps, and I hope to see you for the next one. Bye bye.